We're at about T-minus 4.5 minutes to launch, and we've got only a few things left to do at this point. Engine chill began at about T-minus 6 minutes. That gets the engines to a cold enough temperature where the liquid oxygen doesn't turn into a gas immediately upon contact, which makes startup a bit tricky. The strong back is going to begin its lean back shortly. We're currently finishing up propellant loading and pressurizing the tanks to make sure they can support the mass of the fully loaded vehicle. That propellant loading is going to continue for another couple minutes still to keep it all as cold as possible. We'll also be performing an engine wiggle. That's testing the thrust vector control system that steers the engine during its ascent. You may also see a vent of gaseous oxygen from the strong back inside of about T-minus 90 seconds. And you can see the strong back is beginning its retraction at the moment, leaning back slowly there. It's going to continue until it gets to about 77.5 degrees. At T-minus 1 minute, the vehicle will transition to internal power, and from there it will completely control the remainder of the countdown. The satellites are all still go, the range is also go, and the weather is looking great. If you hear the hold call, backup launch window is tomorrow at 7:14 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Otherwise, the SpaceX team is excited for launch, so let's listen in to the last couple minutes of terminal count.
Stage 1 LOX is closed out for flight.
Strong back retract is complete. The strong back is locked out for flight.
Rock, verify range is green.
Rock, range is green.
Stage 2 LOX is closed out for flight. Vehicles in self-line. Gas closouts have started.
ASTS is ready for launch.
Falcon 9 in startup.
Ground side gas closeout's complete.
Stage 1 tanks pressing for flight.
This is the LD on countdown 1. We are go for launch.
T-minus 30 seconds. 20.
Propellant tanks press for flight.
15. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Vehicle is pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal. We are nominal.
And we had successful liftoff of the Falcon 9, as you saw. It's pitching downrange at the moment to continue its ascent into orbit. Going supersonic right about now. And it'll be going through max Q shortly.
Vehicle is supersonic.
So we're decreasing the engine thrust to minimize the pressures of max Q, which is the point at which the rocket is pushing hardest against the atmosphere.
Vehicle is experiencing maximum dynamic pressure.
And now that we're through that milestone, we'll be increasing the thrust of the engines in order to get to orbit. But while the atmosphere is still relatively thick, we can prevent it from exerting too much pressure on the fairing by throttling the engines a little bit. We're also chilling the Merlin vacuum engine.
And vac engine chill has begun.
And that call out means that we're bringing the engines down to the correct temperatures in order to prevent the liquid oxygen from turning into a gas in the second stage as well. Coming up shortly, we have a few events in quick succession. The first stage main engines will cut off, the two stages will separate, and the second stage will begin its first burn.
Head back ignition.
And there you saw it. The first stage main engines cut off, the two stages separated, and the second stage began its burn. You can actually see the first stage falling away behind the second stage for some of these shots. That's gorgeous. The first stage will be performing a one-engine boost-back burn and continuing downrange for a simulated landing. And you just saw the
Second stage trajectory nominal.
just saw the two halves of the fairing fall away.
Good from deploy.
We will be attempting a recovery of one of the halves of the fairing today on our fairing recovery ship, Mr. Stephen, as part of an experimental program to reuse those parts of the vehicle. We're just past T plus 4 minutes. The Merlin vacuum engine is performing nominally, glowing red hot there in the vacuum of space. A quick reminder, we will be intentionally ending live coverage or live video coverage of today's mission due to restrictions placed on us by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So don't be surprised when that occurs at about T plus 9 minutes. We will be continuing to cover the mission on Twitter all the way through the second burn and deployment of the satellites at about T plus 50 minutes. Right, T plus 5 minutes. Second stage still performing nominally, and the trajectory is currently looking good. A couple interesting facts about the first stage as it's continuing its simulated landing. This one first flew for the Iridium 3 mission, And the Iridium 2 and Iridium 4 missions also use the same rocket, which means that today, this is our 5th launch for the Iridium constellation using only 3 rockets. We're now at T+6 minutes, which puts us more or less exactly halfway through the second stage's first burn. The first burn is to bring the second stage into a parking orbit. That's going to be an egg-shaped orbit where the maximum altitude at the top of the egg is about 625 kilometers. But at the bottom of the egg, the orbit is only 180 kilometers in altitude. The second burn that we'll be performing is going to circularize that orbit so that it's 625 kilometers in altitude the whole way round. We're now at T+7 minutes.
Stage 1, AFTSS saved.
The chamber pressure in the Merlin vacuum engine is looking good, providing good power, constant chamber pressure, and still on track to its parking orbit. Between the end of the first burn and the start of the second burn, there's going to be about a 42-minute coast phase in order to position the second stage to prep for circularizing that orbit. We will be continuing that coverage on Twitter.
LOS Stage 1, Vandenberg expected.
At the time of the second stage, the satellite will have passed over Antarctica and will be just south of Madagascar for that 4-second burn. Now just past T+8 minutes. Second stage still performing nominally. Still on track for that parking orbit. Today is also the 1-year anniversary of the first time we flew a flight-proven
Stage 2, terminal guidance.
Falcon 9 first stage.
Stage 2, AFTSS saved. We're about a few seconds now from the second stage completing its first burn. And we'll make sure that the burn is good.
Western range assets expected.
We have Zico.
We just got confirmation that the second engine cutoff event occurred. We'll make sure that we are in the correct orbit.
Stage 2, nominal insertion.
And we're getting confirmation that we did, in fact, get into the correct parking orbit. So though we're ending our live coverage now due to restrictions from NOAA, the mission is not yet over, so we'll be continuing to cover the upcoming major milestones on Twitter. That includes the 4-second engine burn and the 10 satellite deployments, starting about 40 minutes from now. So overall, we've had an on-time launch. The first stage successfully got the second stage out of the atmosphere, and the second stage is continuing on its trajectory in a coast phase now to get the Iridium Next satellites into their constellation. So thanks to the Iridium Next customer, Air Force for range support, and the FAA for launch license, and see you online for the rest of the mission.